Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting of the joint conceptual meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission. Accommodations have been made to ensure that the public is able to view the meeting. The public may view the workshop in the following ways: watch the meeting on Franklin TV or the City of Franklin website, watch the live stream through the City of Franklin Facebook and YouTube accounts, and attend in person in the boardroom. The public may also watch the meeting on TV in the lobby. So we will call this meeting to order. If you're expecting somebody coming from Nashville this afternoon, they may be late for supper. I came through it. It was backed up all the way to downtown. There was apparently an officer-involved shooting on the interstate on the northbound lane. There were no fewer than 100 Metro police cars split between both lanes. The northbound lane was entirely shut down at both. They were taking people off at Concord and then again at Old Hickory. And it was entirely shut down beyond that. And they narrowed the southbound lane down to 2 lanes, which took a long time. So it's a mess. So our first order of business tonight, item number 1, discussion of a development plan proposing to repurpose an existing building for a recording studio use, including a modification of standards for parking on 0.09 acres located at 130 West Folks Street, called the 130 West Folks Street PUD. So, Greg?
Thank you. Good evening. Happy New Year. My name is Greg Gamble, and representing this applicant. David Leonard is here with me tonight. David is the purchaser of this building. There are several things that we do really well in Franklin, and the preservation of our historic resources is certainly one of those. If you'll go to the next slide for me. Oh, I can do that? This is Winstead Tabernacle. It was constructed in about the 1950s. It is not on the National Historic Registry. It's not a historic building or historic resource, but it is historic to the Natchez neighborhood and this community. During our neighborhood meeting, we had a lot of encouragement from the neighbors, from the community about the preservation of this building. If you'll go to the next one for me. It's very simple in construction. It's about 1,800 square feet. The intent is to allow for the use of office in this building, and Mr. Leonard is a Christian music artist and would like to use this as a recording studio. The interior of the building will be remodeled and refinished, basically a building within a building for soundproofing. Not only can he not have, he doesn't want sound being heard outside of the structure, but he can't have outside sounds coming into the structure. So the recording studio will be soundproof. He would like to use his business and ministry as an outreach in the neighborhood, and would like to involve the community during opportunities throughout the year. If you'll go to the next slide for me. The property is currently zoned for residential. It's in the R6 district. And to build a building for residential on the property, this building would have to be torn down. There's no parking on the property today. No parking for the church, no parking for office, no parking for a home. And to comply with the base zone that's here now, it would need to be torn down, removed, and a new structure built. The next slide. Envision Franklin identifies this as compact residential. And it says that when there are existing commercial uses, that those may be protected if an adaptive reuse of historic structures is recommended. So we believe that we're in compliance with Envision Franklin as it relates to the preservation of the structure and the adaptive reuse of this to office for the purposes of the recording studio. Next slide, please. We're asking in the form of a PUD to allow for this use on this property. As a part of an office use, it's required to have 2.85 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. So that's a total of 6 parking spaces. Okay? We worked with engineering staff to potentially identify a solution, which would be to provide on-street parking on the south side of West Folk Street. Upon further review by the engineering department, there's not sufficient space for legal on-street parking along this street. And it's classified as a collector road, so the classification of the road would have to be changed from collector to local street. So that is not a viable parking solution for us to provide these 6 parking spaces. I have been in contact with Rogers Anderson, our county mayor, and they own the Williamson County facility that's directly across the street. According to the regulations in the zoning ordinance, remote parking areas are permitted under 2 caveats. The first is that there be a recorded easement put in place so that those parking spaces are available in perpetuity. The second is that a sidewalk must facilitate pedestrians to the front of the building. While there is a sidewalk on West Folk Street, it's on the south side, not on the north side. So in front of Winstead Tabernacle, there is no sidewalk. We have identified within additional on-street parking within the 1,300 linear feet of walking distance that's allowed in the shared parking structure in the zoning ordinance within the various blocks around this area. So we know there is on-street public parking within the required distance. However, there are not sufficient sidewalks to get to the building. In the documentation I've provided to you prior to this and with our pre-application documents, I submitted a modification of standards request requesting the removal of parking requirements for the building. After discussing this with planning staff, we are changing that modification of standards request. We're changing that modification of standards request to 2 modifications. One, that remote parking areas shall be, what it requires is that remote parking areas shall be a recorded easement for the use of off-site parking. And the second is a modification of standards to a sidewalk shall connect the remote parking to the use being served. Rogers Anderson has written a letter on behalf of the county for the benefit of this property, which is located at 129 West Folk Street, allowing for the use of the public parking lot directly across the street for these 6 spaces. Again, there is not a sidewalk that connects directly from this parking lot to West Folk Street, but it would be quite an expensive burden and something the county is not looking for as an improvement on their property to connect that sidewalk. There's limited traffic on that road today and in that parking lot today, and so walking along the drive aisles, which would be typical in a commercial setting, would be what we're requesting. So the modification of standards would be to basically allow for the parking to satisfy this use be in the Williamson County parking lot, and to eliminate the requirement that a sidewalk connect to the building. I don't know if there are any other slides after that. So this is the existing site as it sits today. I wanted to show you the footprint of the building. The parking requirements for any commercial structure is that parking be located either on the side or to the rear of the building. The green area that you're seeing wrapping around is a distance of 6 feet. So that is the required landscape buffer between a property line and a new parking area. So there's not physical space to put a vehicle or park a car on the property, again, without removing the structure. Let's see, I don't know that I had anything else. This is kind of the aerial, yeah, just the aerial view showing the site. David is going to be working with the neighbors in the community on the restoration of this building. We'd like to restore it to its original condition when it was constructed. It does have some fascia boards that need to be replaced, needs a new roof. So there are things that he's going to be making improvements on. But would like to restore it to what it looked like when it was originally built. With that, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Greg. Staff, do you have any comments or?
Nothing too much further, just we agree that this is a historical and cultural asset for the Natchez community, and they also made that pretty evident during the neighborhood meeting with their comments, and just that we continue to work with the applicant about the parking situation.
Okay, great, thank you. So, Marcia's not here yet. Commissioner McLemore, do you have any comments or questions?
I made several at the neighborhood meeting, and I think that they've addressed all of those. The applicant, we talked about this historic significance and the fact that you would need to contact Ms. Thelma Bell and other people that will be able to share some history and to be able to showcase this as one of the prominent places in the Natchez community to make it part of the community as it is. So as long as you can do all of that, I think we'll be good. And you all have agreed to work with historians on that. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. I can't ever reach, my body is made funny. I can't reach these things. It's like I have to. What I was saying is that
There.
I talked at the neighborhood meeting quite a bit about this project, and I liked what the applicant was saying and what he was going to do, and we wanted to make sure that there would be no noise, because their purpose is to not have noise because they're recording studio. So we're not going to be able to hear the noise from the inside, and they're not going. So that's going to be okay. And then we also talked about how important it was to have this as part of the Natchez Street community, to tell a story, not just have a building that you've renovated, but to tell the stories of Mr. Al Winston, Preacher Al Winston, and to share those stories so that it'll be a part of the history of Natchez, because we're gentrification is all over the place, and we've been so blessed to save a lot of things lately. And I applaud all of the people that come before us that want to go along with preservation, because in the past we didn't really see a lot of that, but now everybody that people are willing to take the opportunity to continue to tell stories and not just have a new project or a renovated project, but to share some of the stories that came along with that, so that we won't lose our past. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McLemore. Commissioner Orr, do you have comments or questions?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for coming to us with a project that's a refurbishment and not a scrape and rebuild.
Right.
I always like to see those. With this type of use, what do you see the traffic patterns and hours of operation? What are they going to be?
Sure. And David, you can speak to some of this as well if you want to. Come up and introduce yourself and talk to them a little bit about your business.
Thanks for having me. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. So
Okay.
it's really cool. It's a normal hours of operation, 9 to 5 kind of thing. We only work weekdays, don't really work weekends. So, and then traffic is mostly, artists that's coming in or whatever. So it's pretty slow. It's not heavy traffic. We're not talking about hundreds of people showing up for things. We're talking about, 10 people at most at a time or something like that. So small use, but hopefully big impact for a city. We've had a recording studio in Franklin for the last 8 years. So had a house off of Evans Street. Been there for the last 8 years. It's been beautiful. So that was kind of the big part of why we wanted to be a part of Franklin. We've been a part of Franklin for almost 10 years now, and it's become our home. So, but for the last couple years, we've been looking to grow and to find a bigger spot, but haven't been able to find one. And so we were looking outside the city and all this kind of stuff, and the more and more we started thinking about, the more and more we were realizing just how much we feel invested into the community of what's going on down here. We walk to lunch every day. You know, it's a big part of what we do. We have people flying in from all over the country, and we love showing them our town. And so to be able to be a part of this downtown area and especially the historic Natchez area, it's a huge deal. One of the last times that we were there looking at the building before we ended up purchasing it, we had the doors open and these people came and they just sat down in the pews and they said they'd gone to church there as a kid. And for us, it was such a huge deal because we are such a community. We're a communal kind of space. And, you know, for them to feel like they could walk in and sit in the pews was like, okay, this is our spot. You know, this already feels inviting, and it's already dripping with, you know, the beautiful things that have already happened in this place. So that's significant to us, especially with creating, you know, gospel music and being a part of that. So to be able to create in a space that's been doing it for 70 years, you know, is pretty substantial. So
Nice.
We find a lot of value in that.
Right.
Okay.
Would you share what you shared at the neighborhood meeting about a possible opportunity for the Boys and Girls Club kids?
Yes,
You
ma'am.
mentioned something.
we-
Would you share that?
Yeah, we connected with the people across the street at the Boys and Girls Club, just because it's been a big thing for us of wanting to pour back in to the community. So we went over, talked to them about doing a once a month program with the kids there, anybody who's interested in music or wanting to learn things like that, and bringing them over and doing a once a month thing with the kids there, where we just open up the studio and we teach and we show how to do this kind of stuff, and you know, all the things that we never had when we were growing up. It's all the kind of stuff that we're hoping that we can pour back in, and at the same time we feel like it's a beautiful gift to us. It's, you know, you find a lot of life, a lot of inspiration from experiences that you never had before. So we feel like we'll get a lot of those.
Good.
One more thing. Were you had you purchased this when the pews were given to the McLemore House? Were you that person?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We have pews on the porch of the McLemore House. One of our board members went by one day and saw somebody, and they told us we could have a couple of
Yeah.
pews, so that was you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a big deal. We kept a lot of them, but we couldn't keep all of them. There were too many. So we kept probably close to 10 pews that we will put back into the building. I mean, when we bought it, everything was still there. We're talking about the pulpit, the pictures that were on the walls, all that kind of, the original Bible that was in there. This all stuff that was still there when we purchased it. So we have taken all that stuff and we put it in storage now while we get ready to redo this thing, and then it will go back in as a part of the
Beautiful.
telling the story of what's already been there.
Good.
Well, thank
Okay.
you.
So the studio is called the Creek Music is what we call the studio, but we're going to call it the Creek Music at Winstead Tabernacle.
All right, that's
That
great.
makes sense.
Yeah, planning on putting a big plaque on the side of the wall and telling as much of the story as we can get.
Okay,
Awesome.
good.
Appreciate that.
Alderman Peterson?
I did hear the meeting that you had
Yes.
before, and a lot of people were very interested
Yeah.
in wanting to get something done and to
Yeah.
have you there,
Yeah.
I think. So I can see the parking, you know, but from what I just got from the county mayor, if staff might be able to work with this some way, I would be very hopeful.
Good, thank you. I've got one or two questions. The picture of the building itself, where you see the front fascia boards, and it looks like we had a case come before us last month even, I think, where there was one of these issues where the parking of the adjoining parcel kind of seemed to kind of infringe over on you, and there's not a lot of space down either side of this building, and it doesn't sit exactly square on the defined parcel lines. And so you got cars on either side parking, probably some probably comes in on your side of the property line. So is there a way that you intend to create a way to make some differentiation between this building and the property lines and the neighbors, or?
They do want to add some landscape. As you can see, it's kind of a stark streetscape right now.
Right.
So there are some upgrades and things that they want to do as far as the site is concerned. The community has said, please don't paint the brick. So I think we've heard that comment, but there's some disrepair on the building that needs to be fixed. The adjacent neighbors have 2 gravel parking lots on both sides, and the gravel has over time encroached into the church. So there's certainly opportunities there to kind of push that back where it needs to be.
Okay, great, thank you. Alderman Berger, do you have comments or questions?
I'm good.
Good.
I just think it's, I was just looking it up here on my, to get more of the lay of the land from a bigger perspective from the map. See exactly where you are right across. That's very convenient, being right across the Boys and Girls Club. Now, I like the idea, and if you can improve the outside a little bit on that would be helpful. But I'm not worried that you can't do what you need to do there and have the soundproofing and everything. So thank you.
Good. Alderman Brown?
I think it's fantastic. If you and your staff are willing to make that walk rain or shine in order to do some good in that community, I applaud that for sure. And obviously, Natchez area is very important to me as well. I also love those views on the porch are amazing. So you've already demonstrated being a good neighbor. I can't imagine you wouldn't continue that. So I got no other questions.
Great. Alderman Potts?
I'll just say congratulations on being invested in the community. I mean, and just being received and all that you're doing. I have family still in Memphis, and my dad's business backs up against Sun Studios. And so we've had it for close to 40 years now, and just still seeing people coming in and out of there, this is exciting. You know, I think the only reservation that I kind of have, as we all probably have friends and connections in the music industry, is sometimes you do have studio time that's overnight or late at night, and you know, just recognizing the need for business, that might be my only concern in this residential areas. But since it's already going to be soundproof, I think that probably negates that.
One, the luxury of what we do is kind of, the luxury of kind of what we do is more, people are coming in to work with us more than they are renting out the place as their own kind of space.
Good.
So we are kind of the gatekeepers of what happens in there.
Perfect.
Which is what makes it kind of a lot easier, so.
That's great. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Allen?
Whew, glad I made it in time. Excuse my being out of breath. I'm not in as good a shape as I have been. Anyway, one of the things that I want to say on this, and glad I was able to say it, is that I have talked to the, oh, goodness, here. Anyway, I've talked about this to our petitioner here tonight, and I am, we've kind of gone over some things. I've been concerned about this part of our neighborhood because Wednesday Tabernacle is something we consider historic. Been very concerned about what was going to happen when it was sold. We know what the rest of this neighborhood looks like in this community, and this use, albeit not a church, albeit somewhat outside the box, what this gentleman plans to do with it would allow it to remain would allow it to still remain a church, so to speak. And the use itself, you know, they've talked to the county, talked to the Boys and Girls Club, the outreach for the community would be something that would not be detrimental to the community. You know, the community's changing tremendously, but it's something that I believe that would allow Wednesday Tabernacle to still remain something that is, as far as the community is concerned, to be something that we could be proud of and not be an eyesore to the community, nor to degrade the community. So it's something that I'm fully prepared to support, and if need be, you know, even come to the Board of Mayor and Alderman to speak with. And also to even talk to the neighborhood about if there are any concerns or anything like that, because Winston Tabernacle has been there as long as I can remember. But I've also been very concerned about it. Didn't have the money to do anything about it, but very pleased with what's being proposed. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Is Alderman Baggett with us today?
Right here.
Go.
Yeah, I think the couple things. One, related to the use. I mean, obviously, everyone's behind the. Sounds like not everyone, but everyone hasn't spoken yet. But future use. I guess we're all behind the current use, and I guess what this may just be a lack of my understanding of how the change or this what's proposed would. It's not necessarily you, but the next owner or the next, and what, want to make sure, tell me what kind of protections there are for that.
Thank you so much, and I completely forgot one very, very important piece of this. In your, the initial pre-app submittal, we had requested 2 uses, office and residential. We're removing the residential use from the submittal going forward. We're only requesting the use of office. So if the recording studio wakes up one day and says, oh my gosh, we need 3,000 square feet, we've got to move out of here, office and 6 parking spaces will be what is required and zoned for this building. This is going to be a PUD. It's locked in. If anybody wants to change that, they've got to come back through the board, mayor, and alderman at this point. So this is a tool, I guess you could say, that really kind of protects the resource.
I think it's great, and I think this whole area with 264 Natchez and a number of other things is becoming kind of its own destination, and so maybe even some outside signage. I think you said a plaque, but the historic association, even something out there, that would be great. Just because there's going to be a lot of foot traffic, with the battlefield across the street and all that. So this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, glad it's not here. Alderman Blanton.
So I'm not going to look at you because I'm going to get a crick in my neck, but nice to meet you. So it's funny, I look at this building, I am part of the Williamson County Homeless Alliance, and I guess the last couple of years, Kevin said we were looking at this to possibly be a transition place for our mission, but the property owners wouldn't sell it to us. So I'm so glad that it's ended up in really good hands. So that's kind of a cool story, because you do worry about what's going to happen to some of these properties that have kind of laid in disrepair for so long. I also want to say that this is one of those times for me where when we get approached with modifications of standards, it typically just meets this just debate. And I love that these modification of standards for a change are celebrated. And I really wish that we could find ways to celebrate things that are beyond the cookie cutter zoning ordinance and Vision Franklin rule book that we hand people, and use our common sense to know that when things work and it's good and it feels right, it's okay to do something different. I know that's probably not the popular thing to say, and I apologize, but, well, and that's why we're elected officials, and that's why we have a planning commission, for us to use our common sense. So it seems like common sense might be prevailing.
Thank you.
And I don't know you, mate. I don't know you. I'm just saying.
Alderman Hanson. No comments? Thank you. And Mayor Moore.
Amen. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I add something real
Yes,
quick?
yes, please, Aaron.
It's not really about this specifically, but one of the things, it highlights an issue that may come before you in the coming months. One of the things we've seen just in the last year, probably 3 or 4 times, with a change in use, but there's not a physical change in the building, but there might be a change that drives a different perspective on parking, especially around downtown, this area where we may need to build in some greater flexibility on how you look at that. We talk about shared parking, but there may be some ways to think about that a little differently. So staff is working on some elements of that. I won't go through the details of some of those, but of the specific incidents where that's come up, but this is an example of that. Where you're not changing the building, you're not building on or whatever, but the parking calculation's a little different. And how do we work with folks to use both shared parking options, especially in and around downtown or a historic neighborhood like this, without kind of working against your purposes? So this highlights an issue that we're working on. So in the coming months, you'll probably see some discussion about that broader topic that would apply for this type of situation,
Right.
as well as some others that have come up recently.
Because I think some of the more recent modifications of standards that we've dealt with have to do with parking and some of the areas.
So we're seeing a couple, there's sort of a theme
Yeah,
developing,
yeah.
and we're seeing it too, and we're working on some ways to maybe look at it broader to help you maybe avoid some of that discussion or have some more tools in
Right.
the toolkit. So just sort of I guess, coming attractions that we may be talking about. Thank you.
Okay.
I would
Great, thank
remind you that we talk all the time about connectivity and walkability. And so I think as we look at this parking issue that Mr. Stuckey mentioned, is that people should be able to walk more than 15 minutes or a block and a half to get somewhere.
Right. Great. Okay. Item number 2 tonight, discussion of the Brownland Farms Development Plan, including revisions made in response to Bowman's direction at the November 9th, 2020 public hearing. So I'll turn it over to the applicant, Greg.
Thank you. We have a new master plan for Brownland Farms. The board and mayor and aldermen met on October the 12th last year, and there were 5 conditions of approval that were discussed. We believe that we've satisfied those 5 conditions of approval and would like to share the new plan with you tonight. It's my understanding that this plan will travel back to the Planning Commission for recommendation, and then back to board, mayor, and alderman. This joint conceptual workshop, I don't believe was required, but we are very interested in hearing from you tonight, hearing your input, gathering your comments. So I appreciate you giving us this forum to do that. Thank you. This is the previous master plan that we presented to you
Okay.
Last year. Showed a total of 471 homes. You can go to the next slide. The next few slides are just a little bit of a reminder. This is the full intent of, full area of the Brownland PUD. It does include property on both sides of Hillsborough Road, both sides of Mac Hatcher Parkway. This is the 2010 flood for this area. You can see major flooding happening on the south side, or the south side of the Harpeth River, next to Riser Point. You can see areas as the Harpeth River is bending around Brownland where the water kind of is cutting across. I don't know if you can see, maybe it's easier on this side over here, but you can see that there are areas of Brownland that are not underwater. And what that means is that there are some shallow areas that are on Brownland with shallow floodplain, I should say. Okay. There are also structures on the property. There are barns, fences that impede the flow of water and impede the floodplain on the next slide. And there are areas that have been built up. This is one of the stage areas that is a viewing area for equestrian use of this field, and it is above the 100-year floodplain. Okay. There are also areas where there are cars left that need to be cleaned up, and areas of temporary stockpile. This is a temporary agricultural stockpile area, again, sitting up above the floodplain that needs to be removed. So there are 5 conditions of approval. As I mentioned, I'm going to walk through those really quickly. I'm going to go to the next slide. So we have a new master plan, though, that's responding to that. In our new master plan, we have increased the variety of lot sizes and homes. Previously, the largest lot that we had in our master plan had a width of only 65 feet. We now have introduced 100-foot wide lots and 85-foot wide single-family lots for side entry garage. Those are shown along the outer edges, adjacent to the open space, alongside the south side and the north sides of the property. We have various alley-loaded single-family homes as well as integrated townhomes and multiplex buildings. The multiplex buildings and the townhomes are planned primarily along the Hillsborough Road corridor. We do have an area that is central right here on the inside, which will have alley-loaded townhomes in close proximity to the amenity area. So we have two parks. One is more of a passive park. The other park will have a clubhouse, swimming pool, and both of those are organizing elements within the neighborhood. We have submitted for pre-application meeting. Comments that have come back from staff have addressed, what's the alley section called? Muse Alley. We cannot have one Muse Alley teeing into another Muse Alley. So we've had to redesign, and we're in the process of doing that now. So this area up here at the entrance is being redesigned, as well as this area to the north near the church, where we had Muse Alleys intersecting with other Muse Alleys. So you're going to see a different plan for those areas, somewhat similar, but it is changing to react to staff's comments. The home that is on the site today, the Brownland house, is being preserved as a part of this plan. There's been a lot of conversation about converting it into a community asset, letting it be at the clubhouse. But it's really difficult to convert a residential structure into commercial. There's no elevator in the house. We don't have handicap accessibility into the house. So it will be sold as a single-family residential home. And we're going to keep that. I think the property is about 2 acres in size, about 1.5 acres to 2 acres in size for that house. So adjacent to it, we said, well, we can't come in and just put small lots with smaller single-family homes directly adjacent to it. So those are 100-foot wide estate lots that will be adjacent to the existing Brownland house. And so the homes will be built there, probably equivalent size to that house. So if you can go to the next slide for me. Oh, I forgot one thing. The new master plan, we're reducing the number of homes from 471 to 357 houses that are proposed on this plan. It is a smaller footprint, but one of the conditions of approval was that prior to the approval of the first site plan, the applicant shall provide deeded emergency access easement and improvement plans by bypassing Hillsborough Road between Mac Hatcher and Fulton Greer Road. This condition does not include the proposed 8 lots on Petit Place, which have access to Spencer Creek Road above the 100-year floodplain. So this portion that you're seeing here along Hillsborough Road is inundated with 0 to 17 inches of water during a 100-year flood event. We've been working with the property owner of Site 1 and are negotiating with them an access easement across the property that would connect from Mac Hatcher Parkway to Hillsborough Road and allow emergency vehicles or the safe passage of residents in the event that there is a 100-year flood. So they can get to Mac Hatcher Parkway and they can get all the way to West Haven if need be, out of the 100-year floodplain. The second, we're required to, prior to a grading permit, we must have FEMA's approval. That's a current requirement of your zoning code, but we're fine with it being a condition of approval. We know that that's a part of the process and know that we have to get FEMA's approval prior to any grading. On this plan, we have talked a lot about floodplain conservation in the past, and this new plan further promotes floodplain conservation. Out of 187 acres, 148 acres of floodplain remain, 79% of the floodplain area on the property. All the residential lots that are designed as a part of Brownland will be 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain at the 500 floodplain elevation. All the homes are required to be 3 feet above, the finished floor is required to be 3 feet above the 100-year floodplain. All of the Harpeth River buffers remain undisturbed. And we're preserving 41 acres of trees currently on the site, which is the vast majority of the trees that are there now. Okay, Amy. The third condition of approval was that, all residential lots, that only the floodplain area that's 36 inches in depth be filled. This area that you're seeing here in yellow on this map is the area of the property where the floodplain is between 0 and 36 inches. So the master plan design is within that area. We are removing the obstructions in the floodplain that are there today, barns, fences, those things that obstruct the flow of water. We are restoring floodplain in areas that have been used as a part of agricultural process in the past. We are increasing the storage capacity of the floodplain on this property and required to provide 150% compensating cut and fill. And we are providing the opportunity for the Harpeth River to return to its natural occurring flow pattern, and most specifically is in this lower area here. Over time, the land is just, it has a ridge in that particular area, preventing the water, as you saw from the 2010 photo, from spreading out and cutting this corner in a natural pattern. And so we're restoring that natural flow of the river as a part of this plan. Okay. The fourth condition of approval was that all condominium buildings have a maximum of 4 homes per building. So we are removing the condominium structures that you see here that had 21 units, 16 units, 21 units. Those have now been removed from the master plan, and we have multiplex buildings that are shown there along Hillsborough Road and along the entrance coming in. We'll have sufficient parking both on street and on the lots for those multiplex buildings. And let's see, I think I talked about this one. I want to reiterate just for a second. The orange area that we've colored here, this is the area where the floodway currently cuts across between Christ Community Church and the Harpeth River during a 100-year flood event. We are proposing to fill that area in as a part of this proposal. The areas then that you're seeing here in yellow, those are the areas that are between 0 and 36 inches of existing floodplain. The other areas outside of that are in the floodplain are much deeper than 3 feet, and so we're leaving those areas undeveloped. Okay. And lastly, the development shall have a maximum of 395 total homes, including the homes proposed at Petite Place. And again, we are proposing a total of 357 homes with this master plan. So we're below the 395 as conditioned by the board, mayor, and aldermen. This is just a kind of a refresher. The architectural quality and style that you're seeing in our photographs resonate with Berry Farms, resonate with West Haven, and really believe that that is at a minimum the bar that this development will have for architecture. With that, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Allen, if you have questions or
No
comments.
comments at this time.
Well, I've got a couple. In the area that you identified as being where you color-coded where fill would be placed, and the River Conservation and Stewardship slide where you show the areas of cut. So you've got an area, you identify that, if I can use the map on the back wall back there. The east split, this is called the east split of the Harpeth River, and the other side was the west split of the Harpeth River. They're mapped FEMA sections of floodway, and so this identifies that you're going to carry 18% of the flow, the water flow, at the 100-year flood level, which I think is probably fairly consistent with what it would carry based on today's models.
It's very close.
The other channel carried about 6% of the flow at a 100-year level. So that 6% then has to push down around what I call the hairpin of the river. So it'll do a couple of things down here, and I've not seen either the model or the report that Steve Casey did. I don't know what those conclusions were, but it looks to me that as you don't push more down the east split because that's upstream, and so the flow has to go around the hairpin, and so it's going to increase velocity through this more constricted zone. And then these little white arrows that come off at a 90-degree angle, that doesn't represent reality because the water's not going to turn right. It's going to push around the end of the bend in the river, and depending on how high the bank is over here on the Riser Point, Rebel Meadows area, it'll probably fill a lot of that area before the water. It goes toward what guides the water around that hairpin turn. So I just want us to understand what the dynamics of this are, what's caused by filling in what is a natural floodway of the river. And then, go ahead.
I'd say that's one of the reasons why Kevin Estes and me as a planner didn't want to stand before you and say, we had a consultant do a flood analysis and we're going to take his word
Right.
for it. That's why we hired a second Francois.
Right.
We paid this, the city's consultant to review that flood study and flood
Yeah.
analysis so that we had the experts in the room.
Sure.
We had the people.
Because I know Kevin's not a modeler.
No, and we don't want to stand up here in front of you today and represent anything other than
Yeah.
the
So
what's been
these are
validated.
just some points I want us to give consideration to as we go toward our meeting next time. The other thing is right here. If we fill upwards of 0 to 3 feet all the way out to the edge of this floodway, I don't know how that impacts what buffers may exist on the, because I think our floodway buffers are measured from the top of the bank. Then, and the old floodplain came right up through the middle of this. So while on one hand, on the site itself, we're balancing cuts and fills to a ratio of, what was it, 2 to 1 or 1.5 or 1.5 to 1? So while on one hand, we're balancing our cuts and fills to 1.5 to 1, that means you got to cut out 1.5 times more than you fill in. That's a very conservative. It's more than what we require in Nashville. We just balance 1 for 1. If you put a cubic yard in, you got to take a cubic yard out so that you still have the same amount of storage. But the other concern is that what you are doing, though, is you're filling an area, and we certainly don't want the flow of the river to come through the houses that we build in here. So it gets pushed through a narrower band of the river. And so while on one hand we've compensated conservatively 1.5 to 1 here and here by moving, what are we moving now? Are we still moving close to 1 million cubic yards of material?
We're moving 140,000 yards of floodplain.
140,000?
We're not constricting anything. We're not in any buffers. This is the ineffective flow area that you know well, Roger. The consultant, as well as Steve Casey, has also indicated that by taking this 6%, which didn't even exist in 2010 or 2000, before the church was built, and blocked flow, and diverted and changed the flow of this river, we're putting this river back to original flow characteristics, as well as reducing elevations along Riser Point and slowing elevations.
Okay.
But all this has been done by both the city's experts, or that they suggested to us, as well as ours. So this is not looked at once, but 3 times by professional modelers.
Okay.
As you pointed, I'm not. But I do think it's very
I'm
misleading
not
to
either.
say this stuff because
I'm
none
just
of this is
pointing out,
accurate.
I haven't seen Steve's report. It
Well,
was
but
not
the
provided to
report's been
me.
done for a year.
And
You've
so-
had every opportunity to see it.
Okay. So, these are the kinds of issues we just need to be, and Jimmy, Mr. Wiseman, so, I'd like to see the results of that report, but that's not a discussion we need to have tonight, so.
Yeah, one thing we can do is, obviously, if we still need to get this to FEMA at some point in time.
Right.
And it has been reviewed by the city's on-call consultant as well. One thing for the southern hairpin, if the floodway is still within the if it ties back in before that southern hairpin, as you mentioned, the risk of scouring or overtopping is probably very limited. So it's something we can certainly look
Right.
at.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Who else? Commissioner McLemore, do you have comments or questions?
No. Oh, my question was, when does FEMA get involved?
So the applicant will submit to the city the model, which we've obviously gone through this a year ago or so now. And then we must sign the community approval to send it to FEMA. So once that happens, and that is before a grading permit is issued, they would submit what's called a CLOMARS, a conditional letter of map revision, and FEMA will review it and approve it or have comments or something like that. Once that's done, then the grading can be done, and then they after the fact, they must go out and survey the grading that is performed, and then have a final LOMAR submitted to FEMA, and at that point, FEMA will sign off on it, and then the lots are created, and the floodplain is actually moved at that time. So it's actually 2 review cycles through FEMA and the city before anything like that happens.
Right. Okay. Commissioner Orr?
Yeah, just simple. I like the changes that you made. Appreciate all those, and really just look forward to seeing it moving further. I think you've definitely improved the initial project we saw 2 years ago at this point.
Alderman Peterson.
I have said several times, but I would still like to see and learn about some examples of projects that had some similar, if you want to call it the hairpin or whatever you want to call that, to see where they have actually worked. Because the river, the way it twists and turns and curves and everything, is a real concern. And I do know from personal experience that the water cuts across once it gets to a certain level. And so, I mean, in many places, not just right here. But this, to see, as I say, the little curves, the way they are and everything, and to see this as worked successfully at least one place, I would prefer 2 or 3 places in the United States or wherever, to see where this has actually worked with so many curves in it.
Thank you. Alderman Berger.
Did you bring, I thought last time one of the concerns was the water on the road, and you were supposed to get emergency access.
That's
You already
right.
had that, didn't you? Because
We're-
that was their concern, and one of the reasons they didn't want to move forward.
We believe we have a very cooperative business owner, landowner,
Yeah.
working with us in this particular area, Site 1, for this emergency connection, yes.
But I thought, was that the only reason we didn't move forward?
There were the 5 conditions of approval. I believe that number of homes was an issue.
Oh, that's right, okay.
The areas of floodplain fill was an issue.
Okay.
This emergency access around Hillsborough Road was certainly an issue.
Okay,
And I believe we were addressing
yeah, I think you got a great alternative there for
those
that.
through this.
And you've reduced the big homes down to, what was the number on that? It was 50 some, or 40, 60, 80 units, 82 or something? Yeah, the 68, okay, got it. All right. All right, thanks. I'm good,
Okay.
good.
Alderman Brown.
First of all, just a question. Is the footprint of the development similar in size to even though the lot sizes are different, all that, is the general footprint?
It's smaller.
I would love, I don't know how difficult it would be. I keep trying to imagine an overlay in my head of the old and the new, and I can't quite do it.
See the comparison?
It would be kind of nice just to see those sort of laid over each other a little
We
bit,
can
if you
certainly
don't mind. So I'll say two things. One, I have very similar comments and concerns to Alderman Peterson, and I still am not in a good place with, I just think water finds a way, and I'm still not quite there on that. So I do think there just needs to be some more help in that regard. I will say on the building part, though, because I had two major objections. One was the water, the other was the buildings, and I will acknowledge that those big houses were one of my chief complaints, and I appreciate that we've brought those down. They didn't belong here, and so I'm thrilled to see that. I actually like the larger lots ringing the development. I think that flows better into surrounding neighborhoods. So from a building perspective, the reduced number, the lot changes, house size changes, I'll acknowledge that those are improvements on conversations that we've had for sure. But the floodplain thing is still sitting out there for me. And ultimately, just to be very frank, I'll look forward to the public hearings on this in the neighborhood meetings. I'll look forward to hearing how we've progressed relative to the sentiment that's there too. Okay. That's all.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gamble, and thank you, Mr. Estes, for coming in tonight. And Mr. Gamble, thank you for walking through the 5 points and providing the detail of what the fact is right there. That's a great review at this stage of where we are. I do, as Alderman Brown just said, I like the 100-foot single-family home layout that you show right there, and also the retaining the Brownland house. I think that's great. Yeah, I'm interested to see what the flood study is going to be. Water always does seem to find a way to get around, and that is a large concern. But I'll be interested in the public input. But thank you for coming and giving us this information so far.
Great, thank you. Alderman Baggett.
Yes, I think I probably should disclose as well that I do attend Christ Community Church, but I don't believe that has any bearing on my ability to review this and discern accordingly. I also point out that the church was on the front page of the slide, but the church is in no way the developer or it's their land, but this is not their development plan.
That's correct.
So I think it's important to note that as well. On page 6, so the thing, and Chairman Lindsay brought this up, so we have a higher standard than Nashville, the 150% floodplain. So right now, there's 100%, we're adding back 50% more.
Correct. Storage volume.
Storage volume. The last few years, I've worked a little bit with the city on our floodplain ordinances, and the 3 foot over the 100-year floodplain is the requirement for residential homes.
That's correct.
I mean, two primary concerns here. One, we don't want to build something or approve something that will one day, in my area of town, Ewingville area, where we have that situation, and Alderman Peterson lived there as well. Those were not built 3 feet over, and water is, you can find it running through houses at some points. So we really need to learn from our past in that regard. When I look at slide 6, can you get to that? It looks like the mound. It's the mound. And this just struck me as we were going through this. If, that was it. Oh,
That was it.
no,
Go back.
the green
There.
one. I think it's important, valid points by Chairman Lindsay regarding the flow of the water. And that's where probably my most concern, my concerns are with the flow of the water and the impact of all this to the flow of the water through the river. I think that you've done a good job addressing that. But so 3 feet above this line is where the first floor is going to be. Notice the trees to the right. I believe if my house was built 3 foot over this line, my daughter's window would be over top the canopy. So I think I think the flow of the water is my biggest concern, and the impacts down and upstream. and how, as I think Alderman Peterson and the chairman brought up, some of these changes in those two, the hairpin turn in the other area, and how that, and filling in the floodway by the church, how that impact, really getting a good grasp on, what what, as best we can know, the impacts to the stream will be.
Okay.
If, you know, when we, and I will say, I advocated for lowering from 3 to 1 foot. That was something that I felt, and still do feel passionate about, although great minds might agree to disagree. But in this case, it's a very appropriate, I think, standard. In other areas of town, maybe not, but I think it's a very appropriate standard, and I think it is in the citizens' best interest for that standard to exist. 3 foot over is what flood level? What flood event would 3 foot
So
over?
it varies along the river. At Brownland Farm, the 100-year or 500-year floodplain is 2 feet above
yeah.
the 100-year. We're committing through the development plan and through this documentation that all of our residential lots will be at the 500-year floodplain level or higher. So
It's ground level. at
that's
500.
ground level.
Ground level.
That's right.
And then
The
you got-
lots.
The
Not
lots
finished
will be
floor.
above,
But then you're
Finished floors will be.
Finish
above that.
another 3 feet. So really, you're 5 feet over?
No.
not, yeah.
What happened in a lot of last year floods is the lots were a foot over, the finished floors were 3 feet over, maybe the finished floor didn't flood, but the HVACs and all flooded.
Yeah.
We said we're gonna raise our dirt over the 500.
To give more
The
protection.
finished floor will set another foot or 2 above that. So the HVAC should not flood. The finished floor should be well above.
That is something that is, again, I go back to, I think, again, we can engineer the houses to be protected over time. But I think still concerned with how that impacts the river. And still have a lot of questions about that. But yeah, those are my comments. I do think this is different drastically from the one we saw before. And much more thoughtful. I think from the traffic flow standpoint, I think the reduction in homes is significant. But again, the flow of the river and the impacts up and downstream. But FEMA won't allow anything to be approved that impacts up or downstream.
Right, correct. They won't approve it if it increases the 100-year floodplain on somebody else's property.
But again, echo the chairman's concerns on the hairpin, just trying to understand the Rebel Meadows impact. I mean, if what he said is accurate, we can't model it. I mean, we can model it, but we can't know, but engineers can at least communicate that to us a little bit better, that we can really understand some of the concerns that he had.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Baggett. Alderman Barnhill's not here yet. Alderman Blanton, any comments?
I don't really have a lot of comments. I do want to commend Greg and Kevin and for your fortuitous of sticking this through. Because the poor Andertons are looking for some type of relief. So I know that we're going to keep working at it to get the best solution.
Great, thank you. Alderman Hanson.
What is the use of all the green space? Is it going to be parkland, another use?
Parkland. There are areas that we would like to have maybe a farmer lease for hay. We've written that into the PUD as well as a permitted use, especially for the area there to the north. It's a lot of land for an HOA to have to maintain 100% of it. So if we can put aside some of it for farmer to bale hay on, I think that would be an appropriate solution there. Sure.
Okay. And Mayor Moore.
I'm looking at slide 13. And all those arrows and all that yellow is making my head swim. I'm struggling to completely understand all the comments that have been made. I do see a reduction in the number of homes. I don't know if that's enough. I would look forward to some staff comments to kind of fill us in where the staff is on this, because this is a very difficult development site, and it's very difficult to understand some of the things you're doing. I hear Kevin talk, I hear Roger talk, I hear everybody talking about it, but still for us that are, not informed about a lot of this hydrology and thing, it's very, very difficult to understand. And, the bottom line is, what's FEMA going to do? So I'd love to hear staff.
Great. And staff comments?
Sure. Well, to get right to the point, Envision Franklin still has this property in conservation design concept. So staff's stance is still not supportive of the areas where they're showing development in the floodplain. And I think one of the challenges that staff has right now is that there's no guidance on, well, if you could develop in the floodplain, what are some tools to do that? We don't have any of those. So the applicant has put some self-imposed conditions on. They're going to build 2 feet above, and then the houses are going to be raised an additional 3 feet. Well, that's not a rule that staff is given to use as an alternative. So there's a little bit of confusion there, I think, on what's permitted, what's going to happen, things like that. But the bottom line is, unfortunately, staff isn't supportive of this still because Envision Franklin calls for these areas to not be developed. I could turn it over to Jimmy to talk a little bit more about the FEMA process.
Yeah, there's no easy way to simplify floodplain modeling. Wouldn't try to do that. I think everybody go to sleep too. However, the third-party consultant that did review this, it may be valuable for their engineer to, just speak to it from an outside perspective when this comes before the Planning Commission and Board. If that's something you all would be interested in. He has looked at this extensively and will do so before it ultimately goes to FEMA anyway. So that maybe because city staff does not have the modeling software to run the model. We just look for, is it compliant? Does the model tie in before you get to another property? Those type of things, and all the boxes being checked from our zoning ordinance. So in order to truly understand the model, you have to run the HEC-RAS model itself and look for abnormalities, assumptions, things like that the engineers do. So perhaps that may be a good opportunity to educate, maybe simplify this situation, since it is so complicated. Just at a 10,000-foot level, you're just looking at a flat piece of paper, not necessarily understanding what the model's doing.
I'd like to.
Still, could we get some examples of situations that have all this curvature and everything where they have been able to change the river?
I'll ask our engineers again. and I'll ask Steve
Please
Casey
do. And I mean,
again.
as I say, I would like to have some specific
So-
places and see how it's worked.
We are on schedule to come next month to the Planning Commission. At the Joint Conceptual Workshop next month, if there's space available, we're happy to have Steve Casey come back. We'll have him do a presentation for you on
But I mean,
floodplain.
as I say, give us some examples, not just, the numbers look like they work there.
I'll talk to him about that.
Thank you.
Point of order, Chair, I'm sorry, I have a question. So I'm obviously confused here. I thought at the very beginning that Greg said that this did not come back before us. So I missed the boat
It is
on
coming
this?
back before.
It is coming.
Oh, so it is. Oh, so I do have a comment, actually. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
I totally missed the boat on this. Quick question, and I do not intend to hold you to this, but we had a presentation by a gentleman that talked about the 100-year floodplain, the 500-year floodplain, and all of that. My question to staff is this, not for you at all. When is FEMA going to get up off their duff and upgrade our floodplain maps? Because as you know, with all this rain we've been having and all that, we were pretty much told last year that our floodplain maps are obsolete. Let's be real with this. The 100-year floodplain is no longer the 100-year floodplain. It sounds like it's a 20-year floodplain, 50-year floodplain. When is that going to happen? Because when we're looking at what we have now, it's really kind of obsolete, according to the presentation we had by someone who's pretty reputable.
There are some storms that have occurred, Waverly being a really recent example of something horrific that can happen. I think the final numbers came out from that was 20 inches in 24 hours or something like that, which isn't even on the NOAA charts that we use to try to predict these things. So abnormalities are happening. It's very strange. You mentioned the presentation. From a FEMA perspective, we should have newer maps any day now. They are actually already preliminary maps, which we are using to as our for what everyone has to model to or build to right now. So we are already using those maps. They're on FEMA's website in their preliminary status. But as far as localized rain events and isolated events like what happened in Waverly, that is a abnormality that I know Roger's been in many conferences where this is being discussed across the country, and it's very.
It's not just here. It's
not just here.
nationwide.
No, it's not. So all of us are trying to get a better hold on that. We use the data we have in front of us now to do the best we can, and unless there's specific citywide or countywide studies based on recent events, which would be a very large undertaking, it's hard for us to just change the historical data that we use. So it's a tough question, certainly.
I'm not asking you, I'm just wanting to know are we getting some updated maps? That's all I wanted to know.
We're using those now. It's part of this.
As long as we are. Okay.
process, yeah.
That makes me feel a little bit.
I looked at those today. They're on FEMA's website. They're designated as preliminary maps. So they'll be designated, they'll advance from preliminary to pending. And then the Board of Mayor and Aldermen will be called upon to adopt those new maps as new effective maps. And that'll probably, given that these are already preliminary, I've got a set right now in Nashville that's preliminary that we expect to become effective within the year. So
I'm surprised it hasn't happened already.
Right, because I don't
honestly,
feel really comfortable.
Because they were
with
issued
that.
last
in 2019.
April.
I don't feel comfortable with it.
April of 2020, those preliminaries were issued.
So it's
somewhere around there.
Right. The public comment period started then, I believe, but they had started working on them in 2019.
Okay.
Right.
It's
It's a long process.
It is.
Yeah.
And to the point Jimmy made, in Nashville, we've had 3 8 to 10 inch rain events in the Mill Creek Basin in the last 2 years. So these are freak events. That's not the magnitude. But the reality is that a lot of the flow data that's used in these models today is based on what we call NOAA's Atlas 14, which was drafted, which was finalized in 2006. So it hasn't been updated since 2006. It doesn't reflect the level of flows that we experienced in 2010. We know that in the case of our events, the event we had last March that flooded Hillsborough Road again, that was a 10-year event. The event in 2010 was a 50-year event. So we haven't seen in modern history a 100-year flood here. Exactly. The event that happened in 2010 in Bellevue, by the 18 inches of rain that fell between here, right in the heart of downtown Franklin, and upriver of us north, the 18 inches that fell in a day and a half created an 800-year event in Bellevue where the water went 8 feet above the base flood elevation. And all those houses that were built 4 feet above base flood in Bellevue had 4 more feet of water in them. So those are extreme events, and they're caused by, in a couple of cases, we've had atmospheric rivers that cause those freak events. In other cases, it's just the Waverly storm was a confluence of some weird frontal systems and some stalling, but it's just bizarre. But they're happening every 6 to 12 months. We're seeing freak events like that in the state of Tennessee. So that's why I continue to raise the flag about this stuff. That 15 years ago, we could have all said, well, it's a 100-year event. But now it's like, until you've sat across the desk from somebody that's lost everything they own because they had 4 feet of water in their house, then you've not experienced life. So that's why I continue to. Thank you, Jimmy.
Mr. Chair, over here.
Yes, Patrick.
To follow up on the mayor's question, apart from the to the staff, apart from the conservation subdivision not allowing development of floodplain, does this new proposal meet the other standards of Envision Franklin?
So, like Greg mentioned, there's a couple things about this new design that this still need to work out to meet the zoning ordinance standards. like how they're having the muse alleys intersect with other muses. That's not gonna work. They're working on that now. They did remove the multifamily element. That was the other main point of what staff did not support the first time around. So we thank them for removing the multifamily element. But it is, the floodplain is the key piece there.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Just one other comment. I know we talk a lot about sort of what the impact's going to be in a flood in the river, but I do want to note, 2010, Hillsborough Road hadn't been redone, Matt Catcher wasn't there, and I will tell you that along Hillsborough Road and in Rebel Meadows, there is water in yards that wasn't there before. And they're battling with that. And I'm sure all well-intentioned when those projects were done, nobody maybe even foresaw that. It's not necessarily a result of the river coming through, but there is a different flow to water, there's a different drainage of water. So the challenge, especially when you talk about that hairpin turn down there, Riser Point has always had issues. And Rebel Meadows is experiencing water issues, Hillsborough Road, because those things weren't there. So I think as we talk about the 2010 flood, that's great perspective, but let's just remember, there's new infrastructure that's all around there that wasn't there before. And I do think that has an impact on it too. So just throw that out there as another consideration.
Okay, any other comments? We have one more item on our agenda. I don't know if we have time to give it justice. Amy?
Well, let me do this. Let me get us started, because, let me get this presentation pulled up first. Okay. Because what I was going to do today was give us a start of a discussion that we hope lasts over several meetings. We'd like to talk about the joint conceptual workshop, the process that we go through today, the reason why we have joint conceptual workshop. So why don't I get started, give you some of that background so that you're ready for next time. Hopefully we can talk more about it. Is that fair? Sure. Okay, sounds good. Well, and as you may know, I don't think it's a surprise to know that, we've had some tensions with development plans that have been moving through the process recently, particularly when it gets to the BOMA public hearing level. There's a lot of discussion about the inconsistencies with our master plans, and there's challenges to these plans for alternative solutions at the 11th hour, and it really creates an immense amount of pressure for staff and you as voting members alike to have to work through that at the very end of the process. And it seems like there's another way to do that, how to handle some of those issues. And so we thought about, well, let's look at the joint conceptual workshop and analyze sort of what this is and how that tool could potentially help that situation. I know the mayor and Eric has tasked staff with looking at it. They also tasked the Development Services Advisory Commission with looking at this issue too. And Dwight Kaiser is here from that committee to help discuss things, or we might have to bring him back next month. Sorry, Dwight. But yeah, so this is just the start of that, to look at what it is, this meeting, and can it help with some of those tensions, and really the goal is to get the projects moving through smoothly and to meet what our city needs. So let me start by talking about what the joint conceptual is per the description in the bylaws. And bear with me, I'm just going to read it for a second. It says, the conceptual project workshop, a required step in the zoning ordinance for certain planned unit developments, is intended to be an informal forum for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission to learn about and provide feedback to applicants related to potential applications for projects and/or potential PUD projects in light of the Franklin Land Use Plan, zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, major thoroughfare plan, bicycle and pedestrian plan, local street plan, neighborhood impact, context, scale, public facilities and infrastructure, open space, and project phasing. All discussion is for the aid of the applicant only and is non-binding on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen or on the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission. That is a mouthful. I hope you followed along. But if you look at it, to summarize that, that's really, the key words there are, it's a required step right now. Every planning development has to go through this step. It's informal. And the goal is for these members of the committee to learn about the project and provide feedback based on our master plans and neighborhood impacts. And the result is that it's for the aid of the applicants, but it's non-binding. So, with that in mind, I'll give you a brief description of how we run the meetings today, sort of what the procedure is, how we do it, right or wrong. So, what we do is they occur every Thursday. They're right before Planning Commission. No, I'm sorry, they're not every Thursday, they're the fourth Thursday. But they're right before Planning Commission. They generally start at 5, but that's dependent on how many items we have on the agenda. The tricky part here is that there's a meeting prior to Joint Conceptual Workshop, CIC. So there's only a finite amount of time that we have to get however many items the agenda has on it discussed. The membership is the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the Planning Commissioners, and the Mayor. Items right now are mainly development plans because that's the required step that they need, but as time allows or as issues arise, we talk about things like Envision Franklin amendments, zoning ordinance amendments, or any other special topic, like what we're doing right now. The step in the process is that this meeting is required after the neighborhood meeting and initial submittal so that staff has looked at it, but before resubmittal, the goal there is that the discussion and the topics that are brought up in this meeting can be incorporated into their plans before they submit it to be on an agenda. Each item has a designated time frame. We try to give everybody 30 minutes, but again, depending on how many items we have on the agenda, they could get 10 or 15. We try to tell applicants that, allow time for discussion. Keep your presentation to 10 minutes so there's time to discuss. Currently, we don't have a presentation template, though, that we give applicants. It's up to their own devices on what they want to show and how long they want to talk. Also, staff does not prepare anything written. We are only given the opportunity to bring up any feedback that we deem relevant to the group. So, in the last 5 minutes, ideally I would have loved to hear sort of your main concerns, your first big concern that you have with this meeting right now, or what sort of hiccups you see with the process today. I don't think we have time to go around the room, so I think what I'll do is I'll just run through a couple that staff has identified, as well as I went to the Development Services Advisory Commission. Sorry, I always get that name wrong. I did go to that meeting when they discussed in January, and a lot of these items were reiterated there as well. So I do think there's some of the main issues that the group kind of has right now. The first one that we've heard is that there's issues with attendance and the date and time of the meeting. I don't think attendance is much of an issue today. We have a lot of folks here today, but in the past, there has been an issue with attendance. Who comes? And, the issue there is really, if no one's here to give feedback, then the applicants can't respond to it, or the staff can't respond to it. So that was a key thing. And then also the date and time itself. It's before Joint Conceptual. Sometimes it goes even to 4:30, so there's issues there. A big one that we've heard is that there's not enough time. There's not enough time for applicants to present. There's not enough time for everyone to talk and to really get at some of the heart of the issues. We've heard that there's too many applications per agenda. That's another thing. It goes up against that time thing. If we only have so much time and we have to get 5 items in and they're really big development plans that need a lot of discussion, is 10 minutes enough to really give that feedback and really understand that project so that you're prepared when you do go to that voting meeting? Probably not. The presentations itself, are applicants providing you with the right information you even need to give good feedback? Is it pretty pictures, but, once you get a little further down the road, you're like, wait, you didn't talk about that at Joint Conceptual. We do have problems with this, So what's the issues there? What does the applicant need to be providing you in presentation so that this meeting is valid and it's very beneficial? To that same point, what does staff need to do? what kind of comments do you need from staff at this time? You know, do you need a report on it? Do you need just a time to ask questions? It's an informal forum here. Do you need question and answer time just with staff, not the applicant? Good question. And then just in general, you know, the idea of, is an applicant and is staff getting that meaningful feedback that we can then address with the resubmittal and get it moving along where everyone seems to be on the same page, that we're starting to solve any issues that have arisen. So I'd love for you to think about all of those things. Think about anything that I didn't bring up that you know is also maybe a problem with this meeting, or just something that we can evaluate and make this meeting more efficient. And hopefully we can talk about it at the February meeting.
Okay.
We have a couple minutes.
Yeah, and I wanted to make just a comment, because we had a member of the development community express a concern to us a couple of years ago that they came to a joint conceptual workshop, they made a presentation, you know, we all looked, we all nodded, we said, good, oh yeah, okay. And then we resoundingly voted against it a month later. And so the admonition was, if you really don't like it, we'd appreciate knowing that there are issues you have with it, so that we don't spend a lot of new engineering dollars trying to develop something that you're not going to approve to start with, or that we spend our time in the most appropriate way. If you've got an issue, they have a month to deal with it before it comes before Planning Commission. So I think that's an important function of this meeting, to give feedback relative to your overall general concerns. We don't call on you to say, well, I'll never support that, I'll always vote against that, but it's to offer open dialogue without the limitations of Robert's Rules of Order. So that's another component of this. Yes, Bev?
Yeah, real quick, I think more information is better for us all. So yes to the meetings, I would always keep them and make sure that we're doing them on a regular basis. Having a time for questions for staff would be good. I don't know what you all's schedules would be like, but I wouldn't be opposed that we moved it to 4:30 if everybody could get here. And you're doing this once a month, so it's not like it's every week. It's only once a month that you require. And it's on the same night as your meeting, so it's not requiring you to come out another night rather than moving this meeting to another day, which would require you all and us to come back out again. So we might want to talk about that. It's possible to move it up to 4:30. If somebody couldn't get here to 5, we'd definitely understand that, and we could still proceed. That way, if you're done at 6 o'clock, you have a little downtime. You all need a break because you're going to be sitting through another meeting, which gets a little tedious, and sometimes you need that break. Sometimes I know you're all running in there to grab a bite to eat, and you're just, trying to run. So maybe adjusting the time, if that's a possibility. I mean, CIC could be adjusted to 3 o'clock. So it's just a couple things. And these people are risk takers. These people are the people spending a boatload of money coming in here, and I really think they need to hear our input.
Yes, Alderman Brown.
I just, to your comment about the example that you gave, the number 4 item up here was actually a comment that I'd made in the Development Services meeting in January, because I also feel like that goes both ways. A sales pitch of the development is not necessarily as helpful, and it doesn't necessarily evoke comments and feedback that's actually helpful. To your point, seeing pretty pictures and all that, great, looks like a great development, but until we get into it, we don't know. And so what I actually said in that Development Services meeting, it'd be great if they actually, and I think there were some chuckles in the room when I said it, would it be kind of nice to actually have them come forward acknowledging the challenges that are ahead, so that we can just be upfront and give that feedback on that. I will just say, my only other comment about these meetings is, what I appreciate about them is, I love when we sit in these meetings and I hear people say things that I just in a million years had not even thought about, or even my brain didn't even function that way. I mean, even your point around the hairpin turns and stuff. So this gives me a chance to hear from people with completely different perspectives and experiences that actually help me evaluate something in a way that I hadn't before. Mm-hmm. So I see tremendous value in having them, and I don't mind making the time to be here for them. So
yeah, that's great. I think we're really going to have a lot of great discussions about it. We'll make sure we get it on the agenda for next month.
I do have a comment. I do not agree with making this meeting at 4:30 every month. If we have enough items on the agenda to make it 4:30, yes. If we don't, 5 o'clock or 5:30, the way that we always do. I think that that's how we should move with it. One of the things that I would say is, I definitely agree, no sales pitch. Come in with your development, tell us what we need to know, and then we can make those comments. Don't
Yeah.
waste time on that.
I
Your
agree.
sales
That's-
pitch is for when you want to get someone's vote.
Yeah,
Come
and
in
we'll
and
have
let
to
us
think
know.
through, well, how do we
Yeah,
get to that?
let's have an honest conversation. We'll
Right.
tell you what we like, what we don't, and we can go from there. We can all talk honestly.
Yep.
Right. Alderman Blanton.
I'm obviously the absentee alderman, or one of them. Dana probably would have fit that too. Although Clyde's not here tonight. But for me, 9 times out of 10, I'm asked to meet with the developer separately, and there is a lot of time that's given then. And I feel like my mind changes most when I get to public hearing and the public is telling me what they don't like. That, to me, is when the 11th hour changes arise. This is my opinion. I also feel like the Planning Commission exists for the reason to accept or deny developments based on the qualifications that we've set by law internally. So I'm a little bit, I mean, we can all sing Kumbaya all day long, and I love being with everybody, but sometimes it's redundant to me that I'm like, okay, this is all great, but when we get to public hearing, second reading, that's when the caca's gonna hit the fan, and everybody's gonna have to pull the reins. So I don't necessarily agree that this is where all the problems will get solved.
Yeah, no,
So,
definitely.
and I hate to be the differing voice, but Eric's giving me the slide eye. I've been here,
Well,
and I'm
I
gonna
think it's a
try,
valid-
but
Alderman Blanton, I think
It's
it's a
true.
valid point. It sounds like you like to hear more public comment, and so that's just something maybe that we throw out on the table is that something that's needed earlier, some way? I don't know, but, that's why we're discussing things.
Well, this has been an issue for me for a long time because of the lack of total attendance at these meetings, and also the lack of input from the body to the developer. I'm glad to see that we are having much improved attendance, and I hope that will continue. I think what we're tasked with is making sure that the people that are investing money in our city and spending lots of time have a very predictable process to go through so that they can anticipate what they have to do to get to market with their product. And I think that's one thing that we need to make sure, that we're not wasting their time and their money. And and then lastly, I think the public hearing is an important component, but I think that the most important thing are those staff comments and those things that you're pointing out to us, since we're not the most brilliant sometimes about certain topics that you bring us, that it's important that you bring that information to us and be maybe a bit more forceful in helping us understand certain nuances that we're not going to pick up on maybe until we have that public hearing. We need all the information we can get as early as we can get to create that predictability and so on. And I applaud Dwight and the Development Services Advisory Commission that they're working actively. This is a group of professionals that have volunteered their time to work on our processes to make sure that they are predictable and consistent with good practices and encourage people to come.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. Predictability, I think, should be a really strong focus in these conversations we have over the next couple months, in the effort to allow planning commissioners to eat before 7. I'm very encouraged by already the idea that everyone wants to talk about this issue. So we'll bring it back. We can have a better discussion next time. We've gone through the dog and pony show that I had, so we'll be ready to dive right in next time.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody.